Hey guys, this is Matt again, and happy Infinity War week, because we're only 5 days away from Avengers Infinity War. So I figure this would be a good video where I'm going to give a quick recap of each movie that has led up to this. I've watched all of them in the past few months, so I'm just going to give a quick rundown with my collection, which I have right here, of all the movies. And I'm also wearing my Avengers shirt, just to get into the spirit of things. So yeah, I'm going to show these movies I have and go over them each briefly to get us kind of up to speed in time for Infinity War. I did review all of these on my Galuzzo Reviews Facebook page. I did like little mini text reviews of each one, but this is just to go over them again on camera. And we'll start with the first entry of these movies, Iron Man 1 from 2008. This is the one that started it all, introduced Robert Downey Jr. to his pivotal role of Tony Stark, made him a household name again in Hollywood, and I remember seeing this in the theater on opening night. Was blown away by it. It's just such a fun movie, great character development, and terrific performances. He's perfect for this role, and I still think this is one of the best of this series. I mean, I can watch this one over and over again. I've seen this one many times. Every time I watch it, it's still just as good, including a few months ago when I watched it again for this Road to Infinity War marathon. So, Iron Man 1, can't believe it's almost 10 years old already, but time flies. And this is an old DVD from when it first came out, so not really any features on it, just a couple of deleted scenes. But I mean, it'd be good to get this again on Blu-ray someday. But yeah, I love this movie. It's one of the best still superhero movies and origin movies, and still one of the best of these Avengers Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. So, Iron Man 1, love that movie. Definitely one of the best. Which was followed up in the same summer with The Incredible Hulk, with Edward Norton as Bruce Banner / the Hulk. And this movie had a troubled production because I guess Edward Norton didn't get along with the filmmakers, and there was a lot of problems. So that's why in the sequels, Avengers and the other movies, he was replaced with Mark Ruffalo, which I do like Mark Ruffalo, but I don't mind Edward Norton either. I think that he did a good job for the one movie that he had. I think he did leave an impression, and if he had stayed on, I could picture him in the Avengers with Robert Downey Jr. and those guys. So I remember, this came out like a month after Iron Man. That was a good summer, because I saw both of those movies a couple times in the theater. So this is still a very solid movie. Good, solid Hulk action. He gets to destroy a lot of stuff and, just be the Hulk that we wanted to see, that we didn't get in that 2003 movie with Eric Bana. That movie was, in my opinion, not that good. Very boring. this is more of the true Hulk movie that I wanted to see. So I know this movie gets a bad rap. It's kind of forgotten about now, but I enjoy it. The Incredible Hulk. Very solid. And this DVD is also from back when it came out in 2008. But there's a lot of features on this. There's some deleted scenes. And they should have left them in the movie, because there's about maybe 15 minutes worth of deleted scenes, and they should have really left them in. They add a lot of character development. I think it really would have helped. I wish there would be like at least a director's cut where these scenes are included back in the movie. And there's a commentary and stuff, some featurettes. So this DVD actually has a lot of extras. So another solid one. And watching it again, even though it's not Mark Ruffalo, it was still just as good as I remembered. And there's also a fun Tony Stark cameo at the end. Okay, so then the next one is the sequel, Iron Man 2, which came out in 2010, and which it's hard to believe in 2009 there wasn't one of these movies, because now there's about 3 a year. So that was back in the early days of these movies. They actually skipped a whole year. So 2010 the sequel came out, and it is a disappointment. It's not as good as the first one at all. The story is not as good. The banter with Pepper Potts and Tony Stark just seems forced and doesn't have the charm that it had the first time. Something just seems off about that. And this plot in general, it's kind of slow. Nothing much really happens. The finale is awesome with him and War Machine, Don Cheadle. That part was awesome, where they're taking out these drones together. And also, in this movie, Black Widow made her debut, which she never quite looks like that in the other movies. She has different hair and different getup. But, the first one introduced Tony Stark and Pepper Potts and some of those characters. This one does introduce Black Widow and gives Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson a more prominent role than just a after credits cameo. The main highlight of this one is the villains, Mickey Rourke and Sam Rockwell. They're entertaining. I enjoyed them, and I enjoyed the finale, like I said, but overall, this is one of the weaker ones. I don't really watch this one much. Watching it again, it had the same problems as before that I always remembered. So I would say kind of a disappointing sequel, but it's still entertaining. It still has a good cast and fun finale. And this DVD just has a commentary. So that is Iron Man 2. So the next one, which came out in 2011, is introducing the God of Thunder to this universe, Thor. Introduced Chris Hemsworth as Thor and Tom Hiddleston as Loki. Of course, two very important characters that would be in many more of these movies later on. And this was kind of a risky movie because I couldn't picture how they were going to do Asgard and his hammer and all these. This had the most like fantasy elements compared to Iron Man 1 and 2 and Incredible Hulk, but they pulled it off. They integrated this into the universe just fine. this romance with Natalie Portman is, kind of doesn't really go anywhere, and especially in the sequel, her character just isn't really needed by then. But other than that, it's a good intro to Thor and Asgard and Loki. It has some fun action scenes, some nice effects, and probably maybe my second favorite of the first, Phase 1 movies before the first Avengers. I would say probably Iron Man 1 and then probably this. It's pretty solid. And this DVD has a commentary and some deleted scenes. I think the Blu-ray has a few other things, but this is before I had Blu-ray, so I have the DVD. And very solid intro to Thor. And then also in that same summer of 2011, we had our introduction to Captain America, played by Chris Evans. And only thing I wasn't sure of about this movie is Chris Evans, because he had just been in the Fantastic Four as the Human Torch, and those movies weren't very good. And also as Human Torch, he was more comedic. I didn't know if he could pull off, a more serious role like Cap. And he didn't completely sell me yet in this one. He was okay, but it was more later in the sequels that I was sold on him and used to him. But he did fine, and this has a good cast like Tommy Lee Jones, Peggy Carter sets up her character, also the character of Bucky. And this has one of the best villains, Red Skull, who's kind of been forgotten about and is kind of underrated, but I do think he's one of the best villains in these movies. Probably, Loki, and then I would say Red Skull is my second favorite villain. So this is a pretty solid movie. This one's unique because it's a period piece. So it's set in the 40s, so it has kind of that Indiana Jones type vibe. It's from the director of The Rocketeer. I like The Rocketeer. So, Captain America, the First Avenger. And this DVD, I like the packaging, but it doesn't really have much. There's no real features, just a couple little featurettes. But still, the movie itself, solid. And this was the last of the solo movies. The next one would be The Avengers, which is right here. Now, this movie was a very big deal to me personally. I never thought we would ever get an Avengers movie, an Avengers team-up of any sort. So all these movies had been building up to this, and it was a big deal to me. And I had extremely high hopes for it. And not only did it meet my expectations, it exceeded them and was better than I ever thought it would be. And it's still to this day my favorite superhero movie and my favorite of these Marvel movies. Maybe Infinity War might top it, but there's just a certain charm to this one, and seeing this one and seeing them assemble for the first time, that I don't know that any sequel is going to ever top this. It just had everything. It combined all the characters brilliantly. The finale, the Battle of New York, is one of the most memorable, awesome battles, even after numerous CGI destruction level battles in Transformers and Independence Day and countless movies of the 90s and 2000s. Even having a finale like that, this finale was still awesome. and it's still the best finale of any of these movies. And then you have Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk. He was introduced here, taking over for Edward Norton. He did a great job. He makes you not really miss Edward Norton too much, because he's integrated with them really well. They make the Hulk a real badass in this. He saves the day numerous times. So I would say, even though they're all on the cover and they're all in it a lot, Iron Man and the Hulk kind of carry the day in this movie. And then Loki's the villain. He's in his prime as the villain, his full villainous best. So, and this is one that I had on DVD, and I traded it in, and I rebought this on Blu-ray. And it actually has the DVD and the Blu-ray, which is good to have both. But this Blu-ray has a lot of extras. It has a short film, commentary, some featurettes that my DVD did not have. So, very good to have this. And it looks great on Blu-ray. So, the Avengers, the first Avengers movie, and the best superhero movie. And then that was followed up a year later in the summer of 2013 by Iron Man 3. And I was pretty excited for this because of the Avengers and because of how successful it was. And I mean, successful to me. It pulled it off, and it was just everything I wanted it to be. This was still riding the hype from that for me, so I was excited. But this movie, like Iron Man 2, was a letdown because of the story. And what they did with the villain, the Mandarin, who's on the cover, but it's kind of a fake out. It's not really the Mandarin, and they make him like this pawn of some other villain played by Guy Pearce. And I didn't like that. I think that's a waste of that character. And even watching it again, I mean, it's Ben Kingsley playing him. He's not really the problem, but what they did with him, I just don't like that twist. And I don't like this idea of him having all these suits, you know. I don't like that concept. I like just the basic, say Iron Man 1, when he just had 1 or 2 suits and prototypes. I don't like this finale when there's all these prototypes flying around and the villains in this breathe fire, and it's not a very good, you know, I just don't really care for the story, just like with Iron Man 2. I just like a couple of the action scenes. Robert Downey Jr. is good, but I guess I like this better than Iron Man 2, but it's one of the weaker ones for sure. So Iron Man 3, it's a good Blu-ray. It does have a lot of features, but the movie itself is just okay. And then later that same year of 2013, it was followed up by another so-so sequel, Thor Ragnarok, the sequel to 2011's Thor. This one had a different director. I think this was his first time directing a movie. And you got Natalie Portman again, you got Loki again. And, you know, they have their romance again. But it just feels kind of rushed, going through the motions, has a weak villain, and definitely one of the weaker films, but I still think it's fun, and I still think it's not as bad as people say. So I do still enjoy it, but it's definitely the weakest of the Thor movies and one of the weakest of these Marvel movies. Probably the best part is Loki, and just seeing him and Thor's dynamic again, and you know what they give him to do is interesting and fun. But as a movie, it's just alright. It's another kind of just so-so sequel for them, but still entertaining. And this DVD doesn't really have much, but it's okay. Okay. So then in 2014, we have the very, very awesome sequel and one of my favorites of the series, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And this was the Captain America sequel. This time it's set in the present day. It's set after the first Avengers movie. And you got Captain America and Black Widow. They team up. And the movie is like a kind of conspiracy movie, kind of like a Bourne or Mission Impossible type thing. Very, realistic tone, gritty. Very awesome action choreography. That's one of this movie's strengths, is the action. The action, the stunts, the fights, the choreography. And very minimal CGI, only when absolutely needed. This also sets up the character of Falcon. It sets up Bucky as the Winter Soldier, hence the title. And of course they would be important characters all the way up until now with Infinity War. And good villain by Robert Redford. So this is definitely one of my favorite ones. Very solid sequel. Chris Evans was really coming into his own by this point. And I know my cousin, this is his favorite of the series. This is one of my favorites. Not quite my very favorite, but still very solid. And I think it's kind of underrated because it didn't do as well financially as some of the others. But awesome movie, just as a pure action movie even. Can't get much better than this one. Very good sequel. Very good. And then later in that same year, we had Guardians of the Galaxy, which was a very unexpected hit. This was not a very well-known property. And, you have Groot, a talking tree, you have Rocket Raccoon. So, I don't know if they were expecting it to be such a hit, but it was. Everybody loved it. It was really fun sci-fi, adventure in the vein of Star Wars or Star Trek or Serenity. And you got Chris Pratt here as a kind of Han Solo type character. So, and watching this again, it's even better than I remembered, honestly. And this is probably one of my favorites. It's in the top 5 or 6 for me of these Marvel movies. Very solid. It's fun. Has great soundtrack. Tons of action, tons of effects. I like all these characters. So, definitely very highly recommended and very high up there for me in the rankings of these movies. Very good. Guardians of the Galaxy. And, it's just a DVD, so it doesn't have much on it. Just a couple little features, but that's alright because the movie itself is awesome. Very fun movie. So all of those, starting with Iron Man 3 until Guardians, led up to the next Avengers movie, Age of Ultron, which had a lot of hype, of course, being an Avengers movie. They're all united again. And I would say initially I was kind of let down by it because it wasn't as good as the first one. But watching it again, and even just this most recent time watching it, it's definitely better than I first thought. It definitely has a lot going for it. And it's still fun, has epic action. My main problem with it is just Ultron as a character, as a villain. I'm just not really that impressed with Ultron. Even in the comics, I wasn't really that into him. So it's not really the fault of this movie. I just don't really care about that character. But the way they did him in this movie, he just kind of annoyed me. And I thought he paled in comparison to, say, Loki from the previous one. But the action's there. I like the scene when they try to pull Thor's hammer. That scene was fun when they try to lift it. And the scene with, the opening where they're fighting all the Hydra agents. There's a lot of fun stuff in this movie. So it's very solid. It's probably kind of middle of the road for me in the final rankings, but still awesome. I like this Blu-ray. I like the red case, and it has a lot of features on it. I made sure I had both Avengers movies on Blu-ray, so that's why I rebought the first one. This has commentary, deleted scenes, and some very thorough making of stuff. So, pretty solid sequel, Age of Ultron. And that was followed up in the same summer of 2015 with Ant-Man. And this was another one of those kind of risky movies because not a lot of people knew about Ant-Man, and it was going to be more like lighthearted comedic tone. But in the end, just like with Iron Man 1, just like with Guardians 1, it just worked because the cast was solid. I mean, Michael Douglas, he's one of my favorite actors. He was in there. Paul Rudd as Ant-Man, brilliant choice. He's very entertaining. And it's a solid origin movie. It's really fun. I like the effects, the shrinking. That was something different from these movies that we hadn't seen. And it does have kind of a weak villain, as a lot of these films have had. Not all of them have had a Red Skull or a Loki. So some of them, like this, the villain is kind of generic, but that's okay. Because it's just a fun movie. It's kind of more of a comedy at times, but the finale is very fun, where they have this fight on a toy train set. They're shrunken down to size. And later this summer is the sequel, Ant-Man and the Wasp, with Evangeline Lilly. She's going to become the Wasp in the sequel, so that's later this summer also. So, Ant-Man, this is actually one of my favorites also. This is in the top tier for me. Very entertaining movie. So after Ant-Man, we had the third and final Captain America solo film, which is also one of my very favorite of all these Marvel films, which would be Captain America Civil War, which is based on one of the storylines from the comic. And you had Robert Downey Jr. back as Iron Man, which I remember that was like kind of a big deal because it was not an Iron Man or Avengers movie, it was a Captain America movie, and he was there, as well as many other people that are in this. Ant-Man, Scarlet Witch from Age of Ultron, Falcon's back, Don Cheadle as War Machine, Hawkeye, and this movie introduced Black Panther and the new Spider-Man, and did so brilliantly. And this movie is one of my favorite superhero films, just in general, of anything, DC or Marvel or anything, because it has a thought-provoking storyline, and it succeeds at that. It succeeds at being a sequel to Winter Soldier and tying up those threads. It succeeds at just tying up all the events from the other Captain America movies and the Avengers movies. It succeeds at introducing Black Panther and Spider-Man. So that all just very impressed me, how it weaved everything together. The finale is awesome. Cap and Iron Man going at it, and Cap definitely basically wins that fight, which as it should be because it's Cap's movie. So I just really love this one. This is in my, top 2 or 3 for this series and in general of superhero films. That airport battle with Spider-Man and all of them, so fun, so memorable. And I would say if you're going to see Infinity War, this one is probably a must, because it's going to play a big part in Infinity War, what happened in this movie. And also, being a Blu-ray, it has quite a bit of extra features. It talks about the road to Infinity War. It talks about the Captain America's journey, Iron Man's journey up until this point from these movies. It has commentary. So it's got good features to a great movie, Captain America: Civil War. And then later in that year of 2016, we have another origin movie introducing another new character, Doctor Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who I had seen as Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness, and I like him as an actor. And this movie introduces Doctor Strange, who's going to play a big part in Infinity War. And this one, I wasn't sure about it in the theater, but watching it again a few times from home, this movie has grown on me and is probably up there again in the top tier for me with Ant-Man, because it has some really trippy visuals, kind of like Inception, but even more so. And it has an interesting concept. It introduces sorcery and magic into these movies, which is cool. And like I said, I like him as an actor. Again, has kind of a generic villain, but in a lot of these origin movies they don't always have the best villain. But it makes up for it because of him and the other characters and the visuals. And this Blu-ray has a lot of extras, a lot of little, featurettes, making ofs, commentary, how they pulled off these visual effects. So I'm very happy to have this on Blu-ray. It looks great, and this is a good, solid movie. And I'm excited to see more of this character in Infinity War. And we have 3 left, and these are the 3 that came out in 2017. So first of all, we have another sequel, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and this one has all the characters back. It gives Yondu more to do. And it also has Kurt Russell playing Ego, who's the villain. And also Stallone has a cameo, little small part. So I like the cast, but just like with the Iron Man sequels, I'm not as much of a fan of the story or how they handle some of the characters. They're split up for a lot of the movie, and it kind of lacks that pizzazz of the first one where they're all together the whole time. But just like all these movies, still entertaining. It does have Kurt Russell as the villain, and I like Michael Rooker as Yondu. He's fun. Baby Groot is very cute and funny. So still a solid sequel, still entertaining, but it just kind of lacks the punch and the novelty of the first one. So maybe not one of the best of the series, but still definitely has the edge because of its cast. And I still like them as characters, the Guardians. They're fun. And this is a DVD, so there's really nothing to it. I got the DVD because I have the first one on DVD, so I wanted them both to be the same. So that's why it's just a DVD, but it's still good to have, and I still do enjoy this movie. So then the next film, which came out a couple months after Guardians 2, was the solo film of this new Spider-Man. Spider-Man Homecoming, who we saw in Captain America Civil War. He was in there briefly. He left quite an impact, even in his 20 minutes of screen time. Now there's a whole movie of him, so we can get to know him. And I do like this kid that plays him. Here he is eating a pizza. I do like him. Now that I've had an entire movie to tell, I can tell I definitely do like him. This one also had Iron Man, Tony Stark. They even put him on the cover. They put him in all the marketing, but he's really not in it that much. He's in it just enough. He doesn't take over the movie, but it's good to have him in there. And this also has one of the best villains of all of these movies, Michael Keaton as the Vulture. And he was a nice addition and a nice surprise, and his character has a nice twist to him that I didn't see coming. I don't think anyone saw coming. So, because of the fact that I like this kid, and it has Iron Man, and it has a great villain, Michael Keaton, I can forgive some of its shortcomings, such as the action isn't that great, or the effects. I think the Tobey Maguire ones did all that better. But nevertheless, this was a surprisingly fun movie. Very strong villain, one of the best villains, and gives us a great new version of Spider-Man. So I'm excited to see him more in Infinity War. And last, but definitely not least, we have the third and final film in the Thor series, Ragnarok. And this is a movie that I didn't necessarily expect much from, because the first Thor was alright. It was a good enough origin movie. The second one was, just okay as a sequel. But this one just took everything to new heights. It had this new directorial style. It had this new color palette. It had this 80s type synth music, which was awesome. And it had this great villain, Hela. She's there. And she's one of the best villains of these movies also. She's very memorable, very impactful, and between having that great villain, this great color palette, visual style, awesome retro music, And a lot of other great characters too, like you have Loki back, you have Valkyrie, who's there. She was awesome. The Hulk's in this. Part of it is the Planet Hulk storyline. So you have Mark Ruffalo again. Very fun movie, very epic movie, and you know, it blew me away, and it's one of my top 5 of the series, up there with Avengers 1 and the Captain America movies. Very solid movie. Thor Ragnarok, highly recommended. I'd say this is another must-see if you're going to see Infinity War, because this does also lead into it. And this Blu-ray has a lot of extra features about the music, about the making of, there's deleted scenes, there's a commentary. Very solid Blu-ray. Very happy to have this on Blu-ray. And I just love the style of this movie. It reminds me of like Masters of the Universe or Flash Gordon or something, which I think is very cool. A little bit of Guardians of the Galaxy style in there too. So, Thor Ragnarok, very awesome. And then the other movie is Black Panther, which is still in the theater, and it's making a killing at the box office. It's one of the highest selling movies of all time. It's the highest superhero movie of all time. I saw it when it came out. I think it's good. I like the visuals. I like the music. But it's not one of my very favorites. I think it's a little bit overrated. I actually prefer his character in Captain America Civil War. But I do like the supporting characters, the visuals, the music. And it's still a fun, entertaining movie in the end. And I just don't have it to show because it's not on Blu-ray yet. It's still in the theater. But that's another must-see. If you're going to see Infinity War, I would say you got to see that one also, and Ragnarok and Civil War. I think those 3 have the most prominence that lead into Infinity War. So that's basically it. That's my Marvel Cinematic Universe collection. I would say my top 5 favorite ones are the Avengers, Captain America Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, Thor Ragnarok, and Iron Man 1. Those are like just my top 5 favorite ones that I think are, you know, the most true to the comic and the most memorable action and story and visuals and characters. But they're all good, and they're all entertaining in some way. They all have some kind of good entertaining qualities. But those would probably be my top 5. So I hope that Infinity War is awesome. I hope Infinity War is going to be in my top 5 or even my very favorite. I have very high hopes for it. So we'll see how it ends up ultimately doing. I'm very excited to see Thanos as a villain. I want to, see if they get him right and if they make him on the upper tier of villains as he should be. And I'm excited to see some of these new characters like Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, as well as what's going to happen with the old favorites like Iron Man and Cap and Thor. So there's just a lot about it I'm excited for, and it's kind of the culmination of all of these 17 other movies that I just talked about. So that's going to be in just a few days from now, Infinity War. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to record some more videos here pretty soon. So take care and enjoy Infinity War and all these other Marvel movies. See ya.